Hello and welcome to another Flightgear tutorial. Today I want to show you three different things, all included in one test flight from Munich to Innsbruck. The first thing I want to show you is how to operate the Lockheed 1049 Super Constellation. And the second is how to receive and to efficiently use ATIS weather information. And the third thing I want to demonstrate you with the instruments of this Lockheed Constellation plane is how to do ADF navigation, so with medium frequency band, using non-directional beacons. So today we will not use VORs, although this machine is also equipped with VOR receivers, but we will use the ADF receivers, and I will try to demonstrate to you the different advantages and disadvantages of using non-directional beacons for navigation. So let's have a look at the overhead panel of this airplane. Here you can see the radio stack. And these here are your ADF receivers. This is the ADF receiver 1 with primary and standby, and the ADF receiver 2. And we want to fly from Munich across the Alps, so over the northern ridge of the Alps, to Innsbruck, which is located in the valley of the Inn River. It's not very far away. You can have a look how far it is. Lima Oscar Whiskey India. It is only 67 miles out. So, but we shouldn't fly straight, because if we fly just as the crow flies, we have to surpass very high mountains, so there is a little path through valleys to it, and then an altitude of 10,000 feet will be sufficient. Let's have a look at our path in the map. We're now in Munich, already on the runway. It's no problem because we're playing in single player mode, so we're not disturbing other players or ATC. Let's have a look. You have to activate the nav IDs to see the different VORs and also NDBs, non-directional beacons. So we want to go south from Munich. First we will be flying eastbound in the direction of the runway. Then we turn south. Our first checkpoint will be the non-directional beacon RTT here, Romeo Tango Tango. From there we take a right turn to go to Absam, which is another non-directional beacon. And then, depending on the ATIS weather information and also airport information, we will either do a direct approach on Innsbruck. It has only run one way, direction 26, or if the wind comes from the east, then the opposite direction will be the active runway, and then we have to fly a U-turn in the river valley and approach from the other side. So we will be passing the runway on the southern side, and then fly a tight U-turn and then approach from the west, going for runway 08. That depends on the weather information and on the airport information that we will receive later via the ATIS information. So let's have a look at the different data, because we have to dial them into our radio stack. Our first checkpoint, it has a 303 kilohertz. That's already selected. I already did some homework. Then, after we've passed this checkpoint, we continue to Absam, Alpha Bravo, 313 kilohertz. That's on our secondary radio. And once we passed RTT, we can switch from active to standby to 420 kilohertz. And this is the Innsbruck NDB, but we only need it if we have to approach from the west. Otherwise, we will just go directly from Alpha Bravo to the Innsbruck runway. So this is the path, and we already adjusted our radio stack accordingly, so we should be able to receive those kilohertz signals from the three NDBs. And now the ATIS information for weather and airport. When you go into the radio settings, there is ATC services in range. The first one that we will be looking for is Munich. it says ATIS 123.12 megahertz. 123.12. I will dial up the lights a little so that you can see it better. 123.12. So that's the frequency of the Munich ATIS, and if I turn up the volume, then we should already hear this recorded voice.
Temperature 1, 2.0, NH 1014 hectopascal or 29.94 inches, Nelson. Advise on initial contact, you have information hotel. This is Luigi from Joseph Strauss Airport Information Hotel. Time 12500. Expect by LS approach, landing and departing runway 08, weather. Wind 080 at 7 knots, varying between 040 and 100 degrees, visibility 6 kilometers, scattered 1,800 feet, overcast 1,900 feet, temperature 1, 2.0, NH 1014 hectopascal or 29.94 inches, Nelson. Advise on initial contact, you have information hotel.
Okay, so now that we listened to the ATIS recording, you can get the same meta information if you want from your environment and weather menu. There you see also Munich and then the meta, but it does not give you the runway information. So what were the two most important information that we received now? The first is runway information for Munich. They say 08, so the wind is coming from the east and we have to take off in eastbound direction, and that's what we do. We are oriented already, we are standing on runway 08 right, so we're on the correct runway, not on 26. It has to be according to the wind has to come from the front and not from behind. And the second thing that you need is the QNH, so your air pressure in Munich, so that your altimeter works correctly. And as far as I remember, it was 29.94 inches. Let's have a look at our altimeter here. If we turn it, you can see in the lower left corner what is the value. It's now we adjust it to 29.94 inches. And later, when we approach Innsbruck, we are using also the Innsbruck ATIS information to adjust our altimeter to the Innsbruck airport air pressure. So now that is set, and now we can start the engines. Here's the auto start option.
Running checklists, please wait.
So we start up the systems. We can have a look from outside how the 4 propellers are started.
Checklists complete, ready for takeoff.
Okay, so we're ready for takeoff. You can already see that the flaps are activated here. We're on flaps position 1. We can verify this on the instrument here. This is when this indicator points straight up, it means you're on flaps idle position, flaps 0. Now we're on flaps 1. That's ready for takeoff. And the general idea is first we will turn to the south, because this is our general direction. The Alps, the Alpine mountains are in the south. And then once we have a clear receiving of the RTT non-directional beacon, then we will follow the indicator on this instrument here on our ADF, and the thin needle points to the primary frequency. The double arrow points to the secondary frequency. So we will follow the thin needle first once it has stabilized in a certain direction, and it should be more or less southbound. So, and this is maybe the most important information. You see, we don't receive any ADF signal at all if those two indicators are just in a 90 degrees angle. In a horizontal position, it means they don't receive anything, and they can't, because in this instrument here we have the default setting is VOR, but we need ADF. So don't forget to flip down these 2 switches, otherwise this instrument won't help you much in terms of navigating with non-directional beacons and ADF frequencies. So let's switch them down and down. And you see the needle starts spinning. It is not a really reasonable signal yet. Once we're up in the air, the radio signal will be much stronger and much clearer to receive. So that's pretty random what the needle does so far, but later it will stabilize clearly. So now let's take off. Let's first release the parking brake. And we go to 40% of engine power. You see our plane starts moving. We're on flaps position 1. Start and landing lights are on. And now that the four engines are synchronized, we accelerate to full power. The Lockheed Constellation requires quite a lot of board engineers' work, so we will visit the engineer's position very frequently here, almost as much as we're sitting in the pilot's seat. So let's try to use the rudder to keep the plane's nose on the center line. And now we should be fast enough for rotation. Rotate. Okay. Retract the gear. You see it here with the lights. And go to flaps position 0. We will use the autopilot for navigation, so that we got our hands free in the cockpit so that I can show you more details. So the autopilot, I didn't figure out how to use the autopilot here on the dashboard. This is the signal for the middle marker of the runway. So we're still continuing in the direction of the runway. So I'm using just this standard autopilot menu that you maybe know from other planes. The heading bug to control the horizontal direction, I already adjusted to 180, which means if I activate this, we will be flying south. Now that's what I do. And now the plane should bank to the right to go to a southern course. We want to ascend to 10,000 feet. That's the minimum we need to get over this northern alpine ridge. Okay, and you see here the trim wheel is acting automatically. We have to make sure that we are constantly climbing, especially when we're still in such a low altitude. Make sure that you're climbing and not descending. Otherwise, you have to deactivate the autopilot and get very active as a pilot to keep the plane's pitch up. So that's okay at the moment. Let's go for 700 feet per minute climb rate. You should also see it here on the vertical speed indicator. Now we're climbing a little steeper, and I would reduce throttle. I will keep the throttle control manual. I will not go to something like auto throttle. So slightly above 200 knots is okay. And in the Lockheed Constellation model in Flightgear, you have to make very sure that you're not overloading the engines, otherwise they can actually catch fire, and that leads to an emergency landing that you have to initiate, maybe even gliding. So that's something we do not want to try today. So the plane should keep turning right until this red heading bug here, which you can operate with the dial on the right, is centered here. And then the plane should stabilize. That's what it does. It stabilizes. Now we're descending. That's wrong. So from vertical speed I changed to altitude hold, and now the plane goes up again. So that's better. If I don't get it done here, then I have to deactivate the pitch mode here. We are still descending. That's because we're too slow. Okay. Let's have a look at the ADF. We can ignore this double arrow for the time being. We are interested in the thin needle, and it doesn't show any signal so far. So we have to wait until we receive the RTT non-directional beacon clearly. At the moment, we're not receiving anything on this side. Then we just keep stabilizing the plane. Let's go for 700, because we're now ascending too steep. Something below 1000 feet per minute would be okay. Because if you ascend too steeply, then you're bound to overload and overheat your engines, especially the cylinder heads. So that's more or less okay. We have to open those cowl flaps here with the F button, either uppercase F or lowercase f. With lowercase f foxtrot, you're opening the cowl flaps. That's for engine cooling. That's something that creates some drag, but not a lot. And you need this for engine cooling, otherwise you could overheat your cylinder heads. So for this, for ascending, open the cowl flaps completely. That would be my recommendation. And with an uppercase F, you close them again. So lowercase foxtrot to open the cowl flaps completely. Okay, now let's have a look at the engineer's position. Here you have a lot of levers. You don't need to operate all of them, but some of them you need to operate. You have to pay close attention to these two gauges here. This is your cylinder head temperature. It should not be above 200 degrees Celsius for a long time, not permanently. You can go up for short periods of time, up to 270. This is the maximum, otherwise you're in danger of setting your engines on fire. But try to keep the cylinder head temperature on a permanent level below 200 degrees Celsius. This is something you have to pay constant attention to. Every now and then you have to check the temperature. And then you have to operate these 4 levers and these 4 black levers in the middle and these 4 red levers on the right. The black levers are for the turbocharger position. The position is on low as long as you're below 8,000 feet, and you have to flip them down, all 4 of them, if you're passing flight level 080. And when you're descending, you can go back to this original position once you're below 9,000. That's at least the way I handle it. I flip them down when I'm getting above 8,000, and I flip them up again when I'm getting below 9,000 feet. And these 4 levers are to control the mixture, your gasoline mixture for the engines. You can either operate them separately, just by using the mouse, but I recommend that you operate all 4 of them at the same time, and that there's a trick. You point the mouse over this black rail here in the middle, and if you see a double arrow, it means with uppercase mic, you can lean down the mixture, and with lowercase mic on your keyboard, you can enrich the mixture again. And we constantly have to lean the mixture because we're getting into higher altitudes with thinner air, and so we have to add less gasoline. So now that we're on flight level 060, we have already to lean down the mixture a little. And what is the optimal point that you have to reach? You see it here on the 2 torque gauges. If you reach maximum torque for the time being, it always depends on your current altitude. There's always a torque maximum, and you just adjust those 4 red levers until you reach the current torque maximum. So that's what I do now. I move the levers. You can see the torque needles, they go up, 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 then a little bit down, and that was the maximum. I want to keep it for the maximum, and I have to readjust every couple of minutes. As we are ascending, you have to constantly lean down the mixture. Let's have a look. You see the needle is already coming active, the thin needle for the ADF receiver, but it's not yet stable. It's still dancing around, and it should stabilize somewhere to the south. So we should be constantly ascending, otherwise we will not be able to pass the mountains. And we need a constant climb rate, but not too high. 700 is okay for the beginning, and then we will even reduce it to 500 to make sure that we do not overheat our engines. That's very important. Very high climb rates lead to high cylinder head temperatures, and that's dangerous. You're in danger of losing the engine by catching fire. So once you also have, on the engineer's position, you also have some of the instruments that the pilot and co-pilot have. For example, you have a speedometer here, and you also have an altimeter, and that's something you absolutely need as an engineer. You have to adjust mixture and turbocharger position according to the altitude, and you don't want to jump back and forth between the pilot's seat and the engineer's seat. You can do it if you zoom out a little. You have a view of everything you need. Yeah. So now we're already above 7,000. We readjust the mixture with the uppercase mic button. See, I'm going to the torque maximum, and there we are. So once we pass 8,000, I will now reduce the climb rate from 700 to 500. Still climbing, but we're almost on our cruising altitude of 10,000. 10,000, if we follow the correct route, then 10,000 is sufficient to get over this alpine ridge. We can also, how do you know which non-directional beacon signal you are actually receiving? Well, those non-directional beacons, they don't only show you the direction that you have to go to encounter this beacon, but also they are sending their call sign in Morse code. So RTT, Romeo Tango Tango, sends the letters Romeo Tango Tango in Morse code, and you can turn up the volume here, and then we should be receiving in Morse code the letters R, T, and T. Let's have a look at the Morse code. R is short, long, short, and T is long. So the sound we should be hearing is short, long, short, long, long, short, long, short, long, long. Let's listen. This is it. Short, long, short, long, long. So it is the correct beacon that we are receiving. Now we have to make sure that we follow it. So let's see if the needle has already stabilized. We're above 8,000, so first of all I change the turbocharger position from low to high. I adjust the mixture again, go to the torque maximum. Always look, when I do this, always look at these two torque gauges here. Always try to find the maximum. It's not difficult. So now you can see, now we have a stable signal from the RTT non-directional beacon, and it is exactly on our path. So we're on the correct way now. We just make sure that this needle, the thin needle, is centered. And this is the Morse code for R, T, and T. RTT. That's okay. Let's have a look, another look at our cylinder head temperature. It is below 200 degrees, all okay. No problem. So, now that we know that this is the correct Morse code, we can also silence it and try instead to receive the ATIS information from Innsbruck. Let's have a look. At the radio settings, we try to find out the frequency for Innsbruck. This is how you do it. ATC services in range, you press this, and then you enter the airport, the ICAO call sign of the airport that you want to receive. It's Lima Oscar Whiskey India, and here you can see the ATIS frequency 126.02, 126.002, and if I turn up the volume, maybe we're already able to receive the ATIS information from Innsbruck. You see, our signal has drifted to the left, so I'm also turning, using the heading bug on this right dial, I'm also turning a little bit to the left to keep a constant heading for that beacon. You always have to watch that needle because it can change. The closer you get to the beacon, the more precise is the receiving of the signal. Okay, the turbocharger positions are now okay, and we have to take care of the mixture again with capital M. Find the torque maximum. It is on maximum already. That's okay. Let's have a look from outside. Looks all okay. Cowl flaps are still fully open. We don't need to take care of fuel efficiency on this short flight. The sea visibility is quite poor. In the end, we will be flying VFR. According to visual flight rules, we will just be flying along the River Inn Valley. That's where Innsbruck is located, and the airport is located on the western side of Innsbruck. So these non-directional beacons, they do not provide a DME information. They do not provide you with the information of the distance to the beacon, unlike VOR DMEs or VOR TACs. So how do you know when you have to turn when you're passing that beacon so that you have to fly towards the next beacon? We want to go from RTT to India November, which is indicated by the double arrow. But when is that? When have we reached our first beacon? Well, you know it when wait, this is Munich. It is also Munich information. Okay, let's forget the 80s for the moment. It's not so important now. We have to do navigation now. So we have to turn more to the left. And let's have a quick look in the map. There is RTT. We're almost there. We are almost passing it. And how do you know when you're passing it? That's when this needle indicating the direction, when it starts turning quite quickly. When it starts turning either counterclockwise or clockwise, and once it is on 90 degrees, it means you're currently passing your beacon, and then you have to change course to go for the next beacon, which would be almost 90 degrees turn to the right. Now you see, now we're on 90 degrees. Now we're actually flying over that beacon, and now we use the heading bug to turn to the right. So we leave RTT behind, and we go for the UPSAM Alpha Bravo beacon now. Let's keep turning fast, otherwise we get too close to the mountains. We have to turn to the right. And if we look down with the Charlie keyboard button, you see that this is the Innsbruck Valley. Turn even more. Now that's too much. Let's have a closer look. It says that UPSAM is at something around 258. So we turn back. 258. Then we should be heading directly for UPSAM, which is right in the valley. Here on the right, you see that valley? We're keeping the altitude at the moment because this one mountain here is in the way. We have to fly over it, and then we will start our descent towards Innsbruck. We turn even more to the right because what's more important than following your beacons is not to crash against the mountains. So if you're unhappy with what you see through your windscreen, if you're getting too close to those mountains, then don't pay too much attention to the beacons and to the navigation. Just first take care of the safety of your airplane. So now we're above the valley, and now we can start our descent. We go down towards 5,000 with minus 500, and we will also reduce the speed. We have to turn more to the left. until we're flying in the direction of our double arrow here. So now we started our descent into the valley of the Inn River. Make sure you keep your plane above the river, then you're safe not to get too close to those mountains. Okay, even a little bit more to the left. Now we're heading for the Absam Alpha Bravo beacon. Next thing, we want to know which is the direction of the runway, from which side shall we approach. Now from the east as we're heading, or we have to do a turnaround and then come from the west. For that we need the ATIS information. It's still Munich information, so that doesn't help us much. Then let's have a look in the weather information here. There you can see that the wind is coming from the west. It's 260. The wind direction is 260 in the meta, and it is 7 knots. So the wind comes from the west, so we can do a direct approach on runway 26. It comes perfectly from the front, the wind, so we do not need to do that U-turn. We just assume that runway 26 is active because the wind is coming from direction 260. Okay, now we have to switch back the turbochargers. Okay, and enrich the mixture again. Okay, we're below 5,000, so I will start controlling the plane manually. I shut down the autopilot, and the rest I will do manually without the help of the autopilot. I don't want to descend any further. With 4,000 we're already quite low, and don't forget that we are that this altitude is above sea level, but we are way higher here in the Alpine mountains. So this is an alpine valley which is way above sea level. So what we do, we will just follow our signal here with the double arrow for Absam, and after that we should already get the runway inside. If we want a better view, we use the C button to make the cockpit disappear. Okay, still no airport in sight. I want to ascend to 5,000 feet again, so that I have a better overview of the surrounding. So it seems we have just been passing Absam. Now the needle is pointing backwards, so let's have a look. We have been passing Absam. And there, down there, you can see the lights which are indicating the path to the runway. Those lights are located in the city, but they end on the runway. So time to go to flaps position 1 and to align with the runway. Okay, let's turn down this voice. Okay. Now we do a right turn to align with the runway, and also subsequently open the flaps. Once we're aligned with the runway, we extract the gear. More flaps to make sure we don't stall. And now that we're more or less aligned with the runway, we extract the gear. Let's have a look. Here it comes. We're a little bit below the glide slope. Now the landing lights on the runway are too white, too red. Now we're on our way. Now we're on stabilized approach. Let's pay attention to the speedometer. Let's not get too slow. More flaps. I was folding up the flaps. That was totally wrong. We go to full flaps. A very poor approach that I'm flying here. Very poorly executed. But okay, still good enough. No problem in the end. We can retract the flaps. Welcome to Innsbruck. You see, we have been passing the Alpha Bravo beacon, and now it's right behind us. Okay, have a look from outside. The airport is on the left, so we are vacating the runway to the left. Yeah, unfortunately we were not able to receive the ATIS information of Innsbruck. So in that case, one possible workaround is to use the weather information here in your menu. Also, there are Flightgear online maps which can show you the current meta weather, or you could just Google the current meta information from Innsbruck as well. Just Lima Oscar Whiskey India meta. If you enter that at Google, you will immediately receive the current meta information, and from that you can more or less safely derive the runway orientation that is now active for operation. So here I think it was crystal clear. There was a wind speed of 7 knots coming from direction 260, so I assume that runway 26 is active and not runway 08. So we're rolling along the taxiway until we get to the main terminal, and that's where we will end our tutorial for today. So you can enjoy the final views of the Innsbruck Valley. It's a very nice location. You've been there. It's also a beautiful little airport. It's fun and also a challenge flying to Innsbruck. To do a tighter turn here, you can also use the wheel brakes. You use asymmetrical wheel brakes. I was only braking with the right pedal to make the plane do even a tighter turn to the right. Also here, I want to do standstill now. Now let's activate the parking brake, not to move anymore, and we can also shut down the 4 engines here with the overhead panel. I think in real world the engineer would shut down the plane. Oh, you see, this is it. So we're at the end of our little tutorial to show you the Lockheed Constellation, to show you the ATIS information, and also navigating with ADF receiver and non-directional beacons. I hope you enjoyed this little video. Thanks for watching. See you again next time. Goodbye.